Hey guys, we are finally beginning our coverage of Big Brother Canada 12 in the middle of week 1. Now I know I didn't get to do a preseason power ranking simply because I didn't really have a lot of time to make it as there were a bunch of other shows going on, but obviously now that the season has actually begun, I feel like I can talk a bit more concretely about some of these people, though even then we don't really have that much information about them considering that we once again do not have any live feeds and we are instead relying upon these digital dailies, which obviously leave out a lot of information and there's quite a bit of reading between the lines that has to take place here. So obviously I'll be doing my best here, and I will say that the game itself is very much in flux at this point, where due to the lack of information and due to it being so early on in the season, really a lot can change between now and next week to where I'm not even that concrete about these power rankings, but I'll be doing my best here. But obviously there are 14 players to talk about, and as always, no more time. Let's get right into the video. So starting off at number 14, we have the person that is the most likely to be evicted at the end of the week, and here we have Janine. And obviously Janine seemed like a pretty fun presence early on, though obviously someone who was a bit high variance, and I feel like rather bad she kind of got caught up in this effort to create a women's alliance and Anthony being very worried about that, to where she kind of took the fall for a lot of that, to where she did seem like the pretty clear target from early on in the week. She obviously would need to win the veto in order to do so, and while she did come close, she obviously came up short, and it does seem like she's on her way out at this point, where really, even though there has been this effort to get the women to work together, I feel like Janine is someone that didn't really have a lot of close bonds or people that really want to fight to keep her, but really her closest relationship was with Avery, though even then Avery's on the block next to her and is obviously more keen to working with the vets at this point. So obviously it's looking pretty bad for Janine. Now, there obviously could be a shift to flip the vote to keep Janine if people really turn against Anthony, though at this point I don't think it's that likely to take place. So obviously that means Janine will probably be voted out on Wednesday. So because of that, she is here number 14. Now moving on to number 13, we have someone who I probably have the least amount of information upon based off these digital dailies, so I don't really know where they stand within the game. But number 13, we do have Elijah, and I feel like Elijah has probably been the most invisible person on the digital dailies up to this point, where we really have almost no information about his relationships or where he truly stands in the game, where really the only content we've gotten from him is him trying to get into rooms to talk with people, only for those people to tell him that they're in the middle of a conversation and that they need a minute, which to me says that he's not really valued much in the game and there really isn't anyone that close to him. So obviously that's pretty bad on his end. Now, it doesn't seem like he's going to be the target for next week, where it does seem like for now Vivek seems more like the target there, but at the same time, it's hard to gauge where Elijah truly stands, and the stuff that we have gotten doesn't really bode well for his overall position, where again, it doesn't really seem like he has any close relationships so far, so because of that, I do have to leave him here number 13. Now we're moving on to number 12, and these two people were relatively close to my eyes, and there's actually a debate for one of them being below the other person for obvious reasons. However, I did decide to go with the other person. But number 12, we do have Dennis, who just won the power of veto here. And again, I feel like Dennis is, again, one of the people like we haven't seen as much on the feeds. And even beyond that, like what we have seen isn't really that great, where it doesn't seem like he has as many connections in the house compared to a lot of other people. And the people he does seem to be closer to aren't really that well positioned in the game, where both Janine and Avery are on the block right now with Janine as a target, and the fact that he's not going to use the veto on either of them is kind of head scratching, and especially when Janine came very close to winning the veto, like the fact that he gunned for it anyway, just not use it, is again a bit questionable. I'm not entirely sure what he's actually doing there. And even beyond that, you have his relationship with Tola when the other older people's there, and admittedly that's not particularly great either. Tola is probably not the best ally for him. But again, I feel like Dennis is someone that's just kind of there right now, and we don't really have as great of an idea of where he truly stands in the game, to where I have him here on number 12. Now moving on to number 11, and I'm sure some people want this person to be a bit lower, and I did very much consider it, but this person does have a couple pros that keep them this high. But we actually have Tola, who is actually kind of a pariah in the house right now, where a lot of the women don't like him, and a lot of that stems from certain comments that he's made, which are obviously particularly bad. And there was a point earlier in the week where it seemed like he could have been a potential target there, but I will give him a bit of credit for building a relationship with Anthony, who wants to keep him safe. Now, mind you, it does seem like Anthony is keeping him around because he's a bit of a chaotic player and someone who is just like drawing attention away from Anthony. So again, I do question the long-term position to that end. But the fact that he was able to build a relationship with the HOH to where he doesn't even target him, despite Tola not even having immunity, is a pro I will give over Dennis, where Dennis already had immunity due to being on Anthony's team. So the fact that Tola was able to kind of save himself by like building that relationship, even if it's more of a shield situation than anything else, was enough to have Tola above Dennis, as I could see a world where Tola could get deeper into the game because of his connection to Anthony, though realistically, I don't really see how effective he'll really be, to where he's here number 11. Now moving on to number 10, and we have the person who I think will be targeted next week, and here we have Vivik. And obviously he's been making himself a bit of a target due to Anthony seeing him as his biggest threat, but more recently we have been seeing Vivik like having this really big distrust towards Anthony due to their conversation with Bailey, which we'll be talking about more soon. You also have him like trying to mobilize people to work against Anthony. And Anthony at this point just sees Vivik as probably the person that will take the first shot against him. But at the same time, we haven't really seen many people agree to his plans, to where if Vivik were to touch the block next week, I don't really think many people would fight to keep him around. And I feel like a big reason why he wasn't considered a replacement nominee for this week is because he already had immunity. But obviously next week, he'll definitely be in a bit of danger if the teens twist doesn't come back into play. So obviously I think that'll be a big danger spot for him and whether he can survive all this. So again, I feel like the fact that he is in quite a bit of danger coming to next week is a big reason I have him here number 10. Now moving on to number 9, we have the person currently on the block as the pawn, and here we have Avery. And I feel like Avery's game has been kind of lackluster up to this point, where she was initially on the bottom of the Women's Alliance, and while she did try to build a core alliance of Janine, Victoria, and Bailey, the fact that Victoria has already leaked that Women's Alliance to Anthony, and we even have Avery herself being more than willing to go up on the block as the pawn, sort of putting a lot of trust in the vets there, which I don't think is the correct mindset there, and I feel like it's just setting her up to be a future pawn star on the season. You also have her about to lose Janine, who is one of her closer allies there, and had this been earlier in the week where Janine won the veto, there was a shot that she could have been the target there due to some potential resistance to the Anthony HOH, though at this point she does seem relatively safe. But moving forward, I feel like Avery's kind of not in the best position in the world, and I feel like because of that, I can't have her any higher than number 9. Now moving on to number 8, and we're moving on to definitely one of the more invisible people on the digital dailies up to this point, but we do have Donna. And again, I'm not really sure where Donna truly is within the game, where we do know that she has a relationship with Kayla, and she also has a relationship with Vivik, though at the same time, that's obviously not ideal considering that Vivik could be a target next week. So again, I feel like the stuff that we have gotten is not particularly great. I feel like she's not super ingrained within many power structures. But again, I feel like she's probably less likely to be targeted in the future. And again, I feel like there's more upside to her if we have more information about her game, but also with stuff that could happen in the future. But I feel like with the amount of information we have, I feel like I can't really have her any higher than number 8. Now moving on to number 7, we have someone kind of similar to Donna, but I feel like they have a little bit more going on. And here we have Lexus. And again, I feel like Lexus is another person that doesn't really have much going on in the game, and actually consider putting her below Donna in my eyes, as it did seem like early on in the week she was actually towards the bottom of the house, with Victoria not really bonding with her and her just being on the bottom of the Women's Alliance. Though I feel like more recently she has found her footing where she has a relationship with Kayla now, and she does seem to be used more by the vets. Now mind you, she is being used by them to help break up Matt and Vivik, which I don't particularly like. But again, I feel like the fact that she's at least kind of there in the game and could potentially build some inroads through her working with the vets was enough to have her here at number 7. Now moving on to number 6, and this player is pretty hard to assess given their current position in the game, but we actually have our first returnee on the board, and here we have Anthony, who is obviously the current HOH and is one of the best Big Brother Canada players ever, so to see him back is pretty interesting here. But I will also say that his HOH reign has been kind of sloppy, where while he does do some initial work in setting up a relationship with Victoria, the other returnee, and obviously trying to work with a lot of the men here, I do feel like the way he's handled this week is not ideal, where it very much feels like he's trying to micromanage everyone, where I feel like the main highlight of that is his confrontation with Bailey after he saw her talking with Vivik on the spy screen. And I feel like there is definitely a resistance forming against Anthony, where people like Vivik and Bailey have talked about not trusting him, and I can see a world in the future where they do eventually turn on him. Though obviously he does recognize that Vivek has turned on him to where he wants to target him next week. And right now I feel like he's a bit too far out in front to where people will see him as his big threat for down the road, to where I feel like him winning this first HOH was probably not the best way to start the game. But at the same time, I still feel like he has some room to maneuver. He obviously has plenty of allies that are willing to work with him down the road. And at the end of the day, it is Anthony. He is one of the greatest players ever, so I am willing to give him the benefit of the doubt for this week. But at the same time, I feel like this is probably not the best position for him to be in right now. And I feel like if he gets a bad HOH result next week, that he could be in a lot of danger. So again, I feel like there's enough uncertainty there to where I have to have him here number 6. Now moving on to number 5, and we have someone who I just mentioned, and here we have Bailey. And Bailey's been a bit of an interesting presence across the season, where early on in the week she was one of the bigger people trying to get these women's alliance together, though obviously that crumbled pretty quickly. Though I feel like she has also built some decent relationships with people like Victoria and Avery and even Vivek, for instance. So I feel like those are things I can give her a bit of credit for. Now, I do worry about her in terms of a relationship with Anthony, where obviously it's pretty clear that those two don't really trust each other that much. And while I think her relationships with a lot of the other women, along with Victoria, could help her in the short term, I feel like if it gets to a point where Anthony feels in danger, that I could see a world where Anthony just targets her relatively early on for being one of these more vocal people against him. And I feel like in that situation, I don't really know if Bailey survives that, so I feel like there's that. I should also mention the fact that she ended up injuring her shoulder after a competition, to where her shoulder is now in a sling, so I do worry that could also impact her in competitions down the road. So again, I am kind of weird on Bailey at this point, where I feel like she could have some upside, where she could lead this force to take out Anthony down the road, but I could also see that painting a target on her back to where she is targeted relatively early on in the game. But I feel like I'm kind of in between to where I have her here at number 5. Now moving on to number 4, and straight up, this top 4 is not secure at all. This is definitely not the top 4 I had in mind coming into this game, but I feel like with the way things are at this point, I feel like I have to have these people this high. But at number 4, I did decide to go with Matt. And obviously Matt is someone who has been pretty close to the likes of Anthony, Todd, and these other like big guys who could win a lot of these competitions down the road. He also has a relationship with Vivek, though at the same time, Anthony recognized that Matt and Vivek were this duo from early on, to where now Anthony wants to target Vivek in order to have Matt all for himself. And the fact that Matt isn't really responding more to this is probably a knock to his game. And in general, I feel like Matt's someone who hasn't really been on the digital dailies that much. I feel like he is probably one of the more passive players on the board, if I'm being perfectly honest. But at the same time, he seems like this archetype that usually does well in Big Brother. And I feel like with that, he'll definitely have plenty of advantages for down the road, simply due to his like inherent ability as well as his connection to people like Anthony. So I feel like that was enough to have him at least this high on the list, but realistically, I don't have that much information to go off of, so I have him here at number 4. Now moving on to number 3, we have someone very similar to Matt, and here we have Todd. And again, Todd's kind of in a similar boat, not really like playing the game super duper hard. And in general, I feel like both of them are kind of there for showmances more than to play the actual game. But again, they do seem to be well positioned right now. I can't really see anyone gunning for Todd or Matt in particular. Though, admittedly, I feel like had Janine won the veto, he probably could have been in some danger there. But I feel like now that Janine's going home, I feel like he could be in it for a bit. Again, who's really going for Todd at this point? But realistically, I don't have that much information on him either, so I have him here at number 3. Now moving on to number 2, we have someone very similar, and here we have Kayla. And again, I feel like Kayla is someone who I don't have that much information on, where she does seem to have decent relationships with a lot of the women in the house, but also with both of the vets, to where I feel like that'll give her plenty of safety within the game. Again, I can't really see anyone going for Kayla right now, but at the same time, I feel like there just isn't that much information to go off of with Kayla, and I feel like she is largely just playing under the radar right now. But again, I feel like with everyone else like having similar issues and me not really feeling that committed to this cast right now, I do have her here at number 2. And now at number 1, the person I believe is the most likely to win Big Brother Canada right now is Spicy V, I guess, who is obviously the other returnee here. And again, it makes sense why she would come back here. It's pretty clear that she's a favorite among the production team. And I'm actually a little shocked that she is this high in the list. I was really expecting Anthony to come out this week at number 1, but with him kind of messing up his HOH, I guess I kind of leave Spicy V here. Now, realistically, do I think Spicy V is winning this season? Probably not. I feel like she is in a good position right now, largely because she is this vet who was given immunity right at the bat, and she was able to build some good favor with a lot of the women there, but obviously having a built-in relationship with Anthony as well, to where she obviously tells a lot of information to Anthony. And I feel like through this first week, she has been a large source of information to Anthony, where she was the one to leak the Women's Alliance to him. But at the same time, she has not been caught for that yet. So I feel like that is a bit of a pro. And again, she does have decent relationships with a lot of the women in the game. And again, I don't really see anyone gunning for Victoria this early on. I feel like Anthony for sure is a bigger fish to fry over her. And again, I feel like she should be good for a bit. Now, at the end of the day, I don't think Victoria's winning the season. I feel like she is a relatively messy player, and I feel like she's someone who will eventually just blow up her game or make herself such a big target to where she will eventually be taken out. But I feel like with the information we currently have, with the way that the game currently stands, I feel like she's the one that I had the most positive to say about her game up to this point. But again, I feel like a lot can change between now and even next week. But for now, I do feel confident enough to have her here at number 1. And there we go, that'll do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe, really helps with the channel. I'll be back again next week to update the Power Rankings again, so you can look forward to that. I'm covering other shows right now, such as Survivor 46, Australian Survivor, and The Amazing Race 36, so you can expect weekly Power Rankings of those shows. I'm on Patreon now, so if you want to consider supporting the channel, you can do so by clicking the link in the description, and you can also join the Discord server by also clicking the link in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way, but for now, that is the video. See ya.